Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline Magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of business experts to go over the morning's newspapers, discuss what's going on in their own individual business and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's panel. What's caught their eye in this week's punchline, not panel. Anyway, I'd like to introduce you to my fantastic guest. We have Esther Croft. She is the Development Director of Reef Group, the company working on the £107 million forum development of the old bus station, King's Square. We have Amanda Toner, Director of Incento Group Holdings Limited. That's the company who's a McDonald's franchise. They got 5 in Gloucester, 2 in Cheltenham, 1 in Stroud. They have over 1,000 staff and a turnover of 35 million. And we got David Oldcroft, Managing Director and owner of Blue Sky Signs, fast growing, rapidly company. He's doing extremely well. Obviously, does full range of signage. And he's done these fantastic T-shirts for me as well. And finally, never last but least, we've got Neill Ricketts, CEO of Versarien PLC Advanced Engineering Group. He's got over 100 employees. He's based out in the Forest of Dean, and he's an excellent fellow and a Welshman too. I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, who provide me with great coffee every morning, as well as good advice. Right, let's get on with find out what's going on in the national newspapers. I'll quickly share my screen, courtesy of the BBC. Okay, The Guardian. Economy in recession, says bankers. Waiting unveils mini budget. Millions face mortgage hike as UK heads into recession. The Financial Times. Bank of England increased rates by 0.5% and points at hints of a big November rise. The Daily Mail, biggest tax cuts for 30 years, it screams. The Daily Express, go for growth, big tax cuts to herald in the new era. The Times, tax cut bonanza in bid to stop the economic rot. The Daily Telegraph, Chancellor warns bank to get a grip on inflation. The Metro, back from death row. The Sun, Red Rom gets Brits POWs out. This Daily Star, Russian lads flee mad Vlad. Call up? Don't tell them your name, Pike. I don't think a lot of people know what they're talking about there, actually, but there you go. That's the Daily Star. The Mirror, one more child lost to knife pandemic. This is absolutely a terrible story as well. Right, it's all doom and gloom there, but hopefully Neil's picked out some positive stuff, maybe.
Yeah, so my stories, we've obviously got the mini budget to look forward to. I mean, what would you do given that we're going through this massive change? We've had the Queen's funeral this week, so the royal family are changing. We've got a new prime minister, the cabinet is changing, and there's lots of change worldwide, to be honest. So you always have to ask yourself the question, if you were given the job, what would you do? I mean, these are quite challenging times. The papers are full of, doom and gloom, the rising costs, the interest rates going on, the terrible events in the Ukraine. But there are big opportunities here as well. And not least for the new Bond, who the 15 most likely people to be Bond were in the papers yesterday. And I was disappointed not to see you in there, Mark. I did send in a letter saying that you had worked with the SAS, but apparently you didn't make the first 15, but you never know what might happen. The big story for me. Sorry, Mark.
No, it's a man.
The big story for me is really how we seize these opportunities. And I think it's very difficult when you're faced with looking at the papers to see the silver line there. But I've been in the UAE this week. They're also going through massive changes. They've lost one of their rulers, and they've had a big change going on there. But I think opportunity is there. It's just a little further away, and you have to work a little bit harder to get it. But that would be my kind of advice. So I did unfortunately miss the Queen's funeral, but we did see it on the TV. And I thought it was a fantastic experience. The papers today are full of all the stories about the ramifications for change. And I look forward to seeing what King Charles is actually gonna bring to the table and what changes he'll make.
Do you think he'll stay at Highgrove?
I honestly believe that he will. I think he will do what he has to do. We watched his speech at home, and I think, you know, I was love the Queen, big supporter of the Queen, and was fortunate enough to meet her in 2015. But she was the constant in all our lives, and I was trying to explain while I was away what it meant to us. And it's because, you know, it's things like you weren't allowed to open your Christmas presents until you watched the Queen's speech. And so she was always there every year. You know, there was my mum, my dad, my sister, and the Queen. You know, that was the only constants in over that period of time. And I think it's changed. I think the royal family need to adapt to the new world. But we've got William and we've got Charles who are looking at making those changes. And I've been really, really encouraged by the things that have happened since he's had to step up. You know, they do say that it was the longest apprenticeship ever known, but the reality is he had a great mentor in his mother and father, and the royal family is important to the country.
Well, without a shadow of doubt, financially as well. And you know, he brings a lot of people into Tetbury. You know, they go there by the coach loads to see Highgrove. Thanks ever so much for that, Neill. I'm going to go over to Amanda. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for joining Punchline Talks.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, what have you picked out for us, please, in the papers?
So I picked out a story that I think brings a bit of joy, really. So in contrast to that is the swim team in their 70s set channel record and then celebrate with a nap, which I think is a little bit unfair, because I think if anyone swum the channel, they would deserve to have a good sleep afterwards. And it's a group of six swimmers, septuagenarians, who crossed the channel, some of them who've done it many times before. It's a story of hope. And I think when we're talking about newspapers and we're talking about salacious headlines and a feeling of doom, I do think hope and inspiration is a very important part of life. I think people need to believe there is a point to keep going. And something like this, I think, you know, we're talking about the NHS and the bigger picture. We're talking about people being treated for things right at the end and a sort of mind shift change. We're talking about change in terms of people saying, okay, maybe I need to look after myself better so that I don't need to end up going to the hospital at this point, and so it doesn't end up going to social care. I feel this story is a little bit of a metaphor for change again, for how people need to think about things. I think it's a really good example of people in their 70s, and they look pretty good, some of them, I have to say, they really do. But they've got out, they've trained, they've committed themselves, they've decided they were going to set themselves to it. They said in the first paragraph it was like swimming in a washing machine because it was really choppy. But nobody gave up, they kept on going. And when you ever hear stories about people who've at things, you know, Neill, you're talking about the Queen just there. Everyone talked about a sense of duty and obligation and keeps going. I think it's that commitment to like just keep going forward, putting not one foot in front of another, putting one arm stroke in front of another. That attitude I really admire. So I read that this morning and agreed with them that I definitely would be having a nap afterwards. But I was really inspired by that. I thought it was just a good almost metaphor for how we need to maybe rethink lots of things in our 21st century.
I think it's a great story. I like the way you did that, by the way. It was at doggy paddle they tried to get.
I'm actually a better swimmer than that, but
I should hope so. No, thanks ever so much. And it's funny, isn't it? You know, they say, isn't it, the 70s is that 70s the new 50s, is it? Or something of this, the 80s are the new 60s, something like that. Anyway, you know. I just love the positive attitude of that. Anyway, okay, Dave, what have you picked out for us?
I've got quite an interesting story, which has come from the Daily Telegraph. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
It's about a genetic, well, it's a new modification in the treatment for cancer, which is a genetically engineered herpes virus, which they've been working on in London for about 2 years. They've been testing it for about 2 years. And it's being used to treat terminally ill cancer patients. So we've got one chap here who is a 39-year-old builder from West London. He had no further treatment options left. They tried everything else, and he'd basically been told that, you know, he needs to wind up his affairs in effect. So he's actually stated that he had no option left. He was actually receiving end-of-life care. He had injections every 2 weeks for 5 weeks. which completely eradicated his cancer. And what they've actually found with this treatment, although it's still being tested, is that it's actually been positive for about a quarter of all patients. The article goes into great detail about how it's affecting different types of proteins in the body to affect the immune system, etc. It's amazing that we've got this level of detail that they've gone into to try and make these changes, and it's all happening here in the UK. And what they have also found is that on the patients that it's not completely eradicating it from, it's actually reducing the size of the tumour or preventing it to grow any further, which is essentially elongating people's life, which is fantastic. I think, you know, there is a lot of doom and gloom in the papers today. I think that should be front page news, because that is an amazing thing for us to achieve in the UK, and a lot more should be said about that, I think.
I mean, the development of pharmaceuticals, isn't it? During COVID, I think a lot more things are going to come out because of the work that they did with COVID, you know, as well. But which paper is that from, Dave?
That's from the Telegraph.
Okay, great positive story. Thanks ever so much for that. Esther, I know you drove all over the place to get your papers this morning. Thanks ever so much for doing that. So what you picked out?
I did. This is kind of, I've linked, and I note that none of us have really kind of picked up on the budget stories and been focusing slightly more on more positive things this morning. And I picked something which I thought actually had a link to two aspects of the budget, and also highlighted something which I feel really strongly in, which was a article in the Times, which was Top Bananas at GCHQ issue challenge to would-be 007s, which I thought was a lovely story and a lovely idea from obviously our very famous and local large employer, where they've just issued a book effectively with a whole suite of puzzles in it for children, and some explanation about what different people do and what different jobs, and the fact that they're not just looking for super brains, they actually are looking for people from all sorts of different skill sets and all sorts of different backgrounds. And it really struck me again about the issue about skills, and I've really noticed in all the conversations we've had and all the articles I've read this morning about the budget and about growth, there was very little conversation about skills and education and our education system, and how that plays an incredibly important role in terms of in economic growth and the future of the country. And I just feel really, I feel quite saddened actually that it hasn't been picked up. Because I think it's something that it takes a very long time to implement changes, a very long time to get right, and I don't think it's working very effectively at the moment, if I'm honest.
I think that's a great way to bring Neill back into the conversation about, obviously where you work in the forest there, Neill. We all know there's a massive recruitment problem finding the right people.
Yeah, I mean, it's, unemployment is at its lowest. We've had a lot of the people leave to find jobs overseas or return back home. We've continued, I think, you have this cost of living crisis in the background. You have to work really, really hard to keep the employees that you've got. Everybody is worried. It's like the perfect storm for recruitment, really, and so you have no option but to think creatively about how you're going to solve this problem. And that was one of the conversations we had over in the UAE, actually, is about, how do we work much closer on a global scale around training and development.
Okay, that brings me nicely on to Amanda, because Amanda, you've got 1,000 staff. A lot of them are young people working there at McDonald's. How do you go about recruiting, and how do you keep retaining your staff?
It's a really good question, and it takes up a huge amount of our sort of thought and effort and what have you, because as Neill says, it's not just about attracting people, it's about retaining them. And as you know, it's that cost of training, the cost of training to a business is very high. So if you're just recruiting the wrong people and just pulling them in and they stay, sometimes that can cause you more problems in the long run, because there's a deficit there. Multi-strand approach, and we have tried to be, often good people know good people. So we do a big thing on, and I'm sure lots of you in your businesses do this, friends and family. If you know people, and with young people at school, often if you're sort of hanging out with their peers who have that kind of mindset, there's more likely that their friends and peers will be like that as well. And sort of some of the best referrals we get are by people bringing their friends in from the business, from school, similar people, but also friends and family. We've got 2 of our restaurants have got 3 generations of people working there, sort of grandma, mum, and daughter, and that's in quite a few of our restaurants, which is interesting. You get more solidarity there. Multi-pronged approach. So yesterday I was in Cheltenham at the University of Gloucester University over in Cheltenham. So we're going on to sites. We're talking quite a lot to different departments as well. And, saying, have you thought about using McDonald's as a place not only to earn money if you're coming internationally, but to develop your language skills? We noticed we had a big Spanish contingent a couple of years ago, and they were coming in obviously to get paid and to make money, but also to try and improve speaking to people. And we didn't have really thought about that. So that was another kind of hook that we tried to encourage people to do that. But it is very difficult, and it's the attention and it's looking after those people and making sure they're monitored. So we try to put as many processes in place, and we're constantly trying to evolve it, budging people up with someone so they don't feel left out. Young people can leave, we found, if the bus timetable changes and they're too scared to speak to someone to tell them that that's the problem, so to encourage people to, my bus has changed, okay, well, we'll change it. So a lot of stuff like that, just trying to keep close where possible and encourage people to try and to develop themselves. That's a kind of it's working okay at the moment.
Okay, Neill, sorry, you have your hand up. You want to?
Yeah, no, I think it's twofold, because COVID has changed the way that some of our more senior people in the organisation look at life, and so there was a big story. I think it was yesterday, actually, it may have been today that I saw it, where there's big swathes of people that we would normally employ that are deciding that they want to go for early retirement, or they want to work less hours, or they want to work remotely, and businesses therefore need to be very accommodating at the moment, which is very, very difficult.
Very difficult. David, you've hired your son, haven't you?
He's working part-time for me at the moment, but yeah, we had a real problem hiring new staff last year, towards the end of last year. We're getting the right quality of staff last year. That has changed this year. At the start of this year, we've taken on another 2 or 3 members of staff as well, which is great, and at the right sort of level. But it's taken a long time to get that right level of person in and to continue their training. But it has made us kind of reassess. From my point of view, I always thought, well, that's it. We do a certain amount. We look after our staff. We pay them well. But it has made us now look at, right, okay, well, the last thing we want to do is lose any of these staff that we've got. So we've brought in things like healthcare and life insurance and extra holidays. And like Neill said, people are reassessing what's important. The extra days off actually is quite important to people. And it's just made us reassess our package. So the quality of jobs that are available, I think, has improved generally, because most employers are looking at creating a better package. So from the employee point of view, I think it's better. Employer point of view, I think there's still a major shortage out there. But who knows, that may change over the next 12 months. We don't know.
It's funny you should say that. I was just going to say, we've got rampant inflation. We've got, the economy, they're saying at the moment that we're in a downturn, we're in a recession, and that might lead to job cuts and job losses. And suddenly we might have more people. It might twist around for being an employer based kind of environment rather than an employee kind of environment. Let's talk about individual businesses, if that's okay, Neill, because you just come back from EAU. How are things at the moment? Is it tough out there?
UAE, yeah, I think it's. I think every business that I talk to in my role as chairman of the FEP and as former board director of the G1st, every business is feeling tough. Every business is feeling tired. We're having to be very creative. We're having to go that extra mile. I don't see any business at the moment that can say that they're having a great time. But that's just the way it is, unfortunately. So for us, we're looking at the opportunities. When you run a technology business, it's a great time to be able to force through change. We've as we said, there's lots of change in terms of the political scene at the moment. We're waiting for that to find out how that kind of permeates through to business. We've got a new business secretary, we've got a new chancellor, and this is their time. This is their opportunity to show us what they can do.
But what about yourself, Neill, on the graphene front? Obviously you developed the concrete side of things. You've got your shoes, you've got your clothing. Are these starting to stick now?
Yeah. So we've got shoes that have just been launched. We've got the largest ever 3D printed structure on the show at the moment down at Design London. As far as I'm aware, it's the largest one anyway. This is a time of big change, a big opportunity, but you have to be full of courage. It can be very easy to look at those papers and to think, how do you get through this? I'd ask anybody that's having trouble or struggling at the moment, reach out to the growth hubs. They're full of information. They're there to support, and I'll be urging the FEP, the Forest Enterprise Partnership or Economic Partnership, to be supporting those businesses. I think it's tough, and you only need to look at the high street or the business pages to see how many businesses are unfortunately not making it. So that could be an opportunity.
It's quite funny now, because obviously I'm in the middle of delivering Punchline magazine, so I've been going around, and there have been a lot of voids. A lot of companies I've known before, unfortunately, aren't there anymore. But what I have seen is new companies taking their places. It's quite amazing how the entrepreneurial spirit is still out there. It's positive. It's always sad to see companies go, but on the flip side, people are still investing in our high street. Personally speaking, I don't get it, but they do. I'm going to have to move over to let's go over to Amanda. Amanda, obviously you've done extremely well. Congratulations buying the other 3 franchises. Do you just want to give us a quick overview about the business itself in Cento, and how did you get into McDonald's? I don't think I opened the door.
So Paul is so thank you for that. That's kind of you. And we have been, we've been really fortunate, right in right place as well. But my husband Paul was in recruitment, financial recruitment for years. Had his own business in Cheltenham. Although I am a Geordian, he is a Glaswegian, so we don't bring much of Gloucester to the area. Sold it and was looking for another opportunity. And we had people we knew who were in McDonald's. And it just seemed an interesting opportunity, and he decided to go for this because it is a business. You're selling burgers and fries, but at the end of the day, it's a huge business, and you're part of a global organization, and with that brings reassurances and a high level of security. But we are not without the problems that are going on that we're talking about. So. We have the 5 restaurants in Gloucester. We started with 1, the High Street, as you mentioned there, Mark, grew 2 more, then got another 2, then the the pandemic hit. And then we bought these last 3 very recently. So within 6 years, we've gone from 65 staff to 1,000. So the change curve for us has been massive. And it's almost, I feel like almost every year and a half, we reinvent sort of business and structures. But I think the most important, you mentioned there about the kind of looking at papers and doom and gloom, and we're talking about the economy and what's happening. The thing is, I don't think anybody really knows, and a part of me thinks we've got to do something different. We can't keep sticking with the same things. Do I agree with everything? No, but sometimes you need to be bold, and you need to be, as someone said, you need to have some courage to do something different. Let's change it. And I think what I've seen in McDonald's is they're very good. They don't stand still. They do reinvent themselves. They do think of new things. And you look at some of the competitors who just keep on doing the same thing. Our world moves at such a pace. You made a reference there before on one of the headlines, and someone having referenced something back to a bygone era. That our world is changing so quickly. We need to be ahead. And one thing I've taken from them is that they're very good. It's kind of almost reinventing themselves, coming up with new ideas, and not sitting back on their laurels and going, oh, well, that didn't work, so what will we do? It's a bit like, well, okay, what will we try next? What's the next new thing? And, but you need money behind you to do that. But I do think that is part of their success.
And congratulations, by the way, buying those other 3 stores. And I just want to confess, by the way, that I've eaten in all of them. Okay, not this week. I know Neil, you might think it does look like I've eaten all of them in this week.
Not saying anything, Mark.
We
Not
will
saying anything.
it's just to put the calories on everything, Mark, so you will know what all the calories are, and you can see the anti-sugar tax, so all that kind of stuff. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes and stuff like that. But, yeah.
We're going to finish the show later on. We're finding out whose favourite meal is what from McDonald's. Okay, so I'm going to go into to you, Esther. Obviously, you've got the £107 million forum development. got this little thing. I'll see if I can do it here. I tested it earlier. It probably won't work now.
That's right. Well, this
Hold on
is
a second. There we go. Right. So this is a little video, and hopefully it will run.
Yeah, this is a video that's been produced by Kier, who are our main contractor, who are building phase 2 of the forum. Oh, and it's even got sound as well. It's to show effectively the sequence of the development, and they're on program, and they're working exceptionally hard at the moment. Long hours, lots of staff working extra hours to ensure that it does stay to program. And what you're seeing here is the sequencing of the events that they have to do in order to build the new development. Those are piling rigs, or meant to depict piling rigs going in. We've got the slab going in next week, and the things that people are going to be seeing most noticeably is the tower cranes. There's 2 tower cranes coming to site over the next couple of weeks, which will be a real addition to the skyline.
That's where we are at the moment, actually, if you don't mind me stopping you. That bit just there, red, just been knocked down, isn't it? The old Tesco.
Yes, partially knocked down. So the 2 tower cranes, as I said, will be in the next couple of weeks, which you can see there. And that's when we really will start to see stuff coming up out of the ground, and people will start to see almost weekly changes to the skyline, as I said. It then progresses. We'll hopefully have the rest of Grosvenor House demolished by Christmas. That's the plan at the moment. That will then enable them to get cracking on the foundations for the hotel and the offices, as you can see here. And then slightly later than that will be the foundation for the new multi-storey car park, because that's actually where the Grosvenor House is currently at the moment. Tesco's is going to be moving into its new home on Market Parade, underneath the new Whitefriars apartments, which, yeah, you can just, I'm just trying to see in that gap. I can't use that gap there, exactly. So Tesco's will be in its new home hopefully for November. The Whitefriars apartments, the 19 new apartments, are now available for viewing, and we've got the show flat all ready to go, and the agents Savills and Knight Franks are taking bookings as of this week, so that's been really positive.
I mean, it's all very exciting, very, very exciting, and it's starting to, you know, when you go down there, a lot of people obviously don't go into Gloucester that way. They don't see it, and it is pretty big.
It's going to be big.
It's damn big. It's going to be very tall and very, very big, is how I explain it to people.
Yeah.
Thanks ever so much for that, Esther, and it's really exciting that I know that I'm going to go down there. You're going to give me a little tour, aren't you, of the apartments as well?
Yes, with pleasure.
I'm looking forward to that. Sorry, I'm just going to go over to David now. David, so obviously your business has been rocking and rolling. What's the sort of fundamental things that's changed in signage at the moment? Is there any one thing that sort of, you know, as businesses move forward, is there sort of some new sparkly? Is it car signage? Is it a mix of everything?
It's funny actually, because there's been lots of changes in materials. With shortages of certain materials has sparked off innovation with other materials as well. So signage being made with PVC free materials, which we're doing a huge push on at the moment. Roller banners, things like that, general display things that are really kicking back off and have done over the last sort of 6 to 8 months, with events and things coming back into the throw again. And what we're seeing at this time of year now is, like you said, there's lots of little businesses starting up all over the place, which has been great, and doesn't get spoken about enough. We see lots of small businesses starting, and they're all looking at lit signage at the moment, obviously with the darker nights coming in. But yeah, and also in regards to sort of vehicle wrapping, there's new PVC free vehicle wrap materials. There's amazing technology with certain materials that we're using at the moment. One in particular is called a flight technology, which means that when we're wrapping vehicles, it makes it a lot easier. So the development of the glues means that they lay it on the back of the vinyl material with spikes so that it doesn't immediately stick. And then when you've got it all in position, you apply pressure and it pushes those spikes in so that you've got a completely flat surface. It just makes the whole process so much quicker, and the materials themselves last a lot longer as well. So we're using vinyls on vans that can last anywhere between 10 and 13 years. So you get it on a new van, pretty much leave it on there until end of that van's life. So yeah, there's lots of little changes with new technology, new machines and things like that. We've just invested quite heavily in a new flatbed, which we just had delivered last week, which means that our volume of work can hugely increase on boards and signage and things like that. So it's, for us, the last probably 3 years, we've been growing sort of exponentially. And I think, like Amanda was saying, you know, you have to diversify, you have to look at what markets are out there and see what's available. And when everybody says anything to me about recession, I just think work harder, work smarter, but be cautious. And I think, you know, that's kind of what I live or die by.
I think that's a great thing. You're dead right. And I love the fact that you're always investing in your business, Dave. We talked about it a lot over the years. I'm going to bring Neill back in because I know he's got to do the school run very shortly. Neill, what story have you picked out from Punchline, please?
Well, I think from Punchline, I think there was good news, bad news. 188,000 in grants coming in, you know, into the county was really good news. I think John Lewis losing £99 million is a stark reminder that things might not be as good as we hope. And so I think it's all about that balance. I think it's about you know, seeing the opportunity and being very nimble and agile. And I think some of these larger companies are going to really struggle with the changes that are coming.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Great to see you, by the way, Neill. Thanks ever so much for joining.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Amanda, what have you picked out in this week's Punchline, please?
One of the things I wanted to talk about was the fact that, you know, when you mentioned there about the high street and more people coming in, there are new businesses coming up, but the innovation that they have to pick up the key part of that. So different businesses, so some of the young Gloucester people coming through who are sort of developing their own lines and getting training on things and learning how to actually speak with customers. That kind of, it's been lost, but how to sort of retrain our young people to understand that communication skills are still really important. And it's almost like an old-fashioned way of doing things, that you can't do everything digitally. You have to go back to the old roots and kind of re-engaging with these people who struggle to quite frankly, to obviously talk to different people, giving them tools and giving them phrases to say and making it easier for them to have communication, build their confidence. And as Esther said before, trying to develop those skills in our young people, you know, not just sort of triaging, trying to deal with the root cause.
No, totally. The amount of soft skills the kids don't have nowadays is quite frightening. You know, they just spend too much time online. David, what have you picked out in this week's Punchline, please?
Punchline, it's a story about the Gloucester Library actually moving in with the new University of Gloucestershire campus in the old Debenhams building. Some might think it's a minor story, but actually I think it's really big news. I think it's an amazing sort of thing that the university have got on board with. Their main Vice Chancellor, Stephen Marston, said it was part of the original vision. They've got other plans with NHS partners, with the new Arts, Health and Wellbeing Centre. I think it's really forward thinking, especially from the County Council. And when you go up to somewhere like Birmingham University, for example, their whole university is centred around this newly invested golden building, which is the library. It's an iconic building, and I think they could do something very similar. And again, being right in with the university, it's bringing young people back into the city centre again, and along with you know, the developments that Reef Group are doing around the bus station as well. I think it's a great lead for young people to get into Gloucester and have reasons to be there. I think it's fantastic.
I think it is as well. No, it just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So join up thinking. Yes, yes, Amanda.
And I just wanted to say on the back of that, a lot of the stuff in the papers is talking about levelling up and sort of other areas and different sort of towns needing to get with the programme. I trumpet Gloucester so much because I think the energy and the courage and the belief, build it and they will come, I really feel that is the sort of maxim that Gloucester and the council seem to be living by. And Esther, you're nodding your head, of course, because but it really, really is. And when you show people around, will they come if we don't build it? Well, you know, they definitely won't if you don't. And I've just moved 2 children out of London to different places. And London is not the centre of the world. It doesn't have to be, but we do have to invest, and you do have to have that infrastructure. And as you say, Dave, that having it something beautiful to look at, you shouldn't apologise for that aesthetic appeal, but it does bring people in. So I think it's really proud to be in part of Gloucester at the minute, because I do feel there's a real sense of, well, we're going to go with this, we're all in, you know, which is great to see.
It is, yeah. and all those parts of the Magnificent Seven are coming together. Esther, what have you chosen, please, from Punchline?
Well, Dave's stolen my thunder, because as you could imagine, that was a story that really pricked my interest, and everything that Dave's just said, I couldn't agree with more. We are ecstatic to know finally it's gone public that the library is going to be in the Dubliners building. I picked up another story, which again I would do, Mark, but you're on trend as ever. Demand for sustainable commercial property rises, and that's something that we've been aware of, obviously, for a long time, and the agents and the commercial agents that we work with have been providing all sorts of interesting statistics recently. So commercial properties, as you quite rightly pointed out in your article, they're going to have to produce EPCs in the same way as our residential properties are. And at the moment, don't quote me on this because it's probably not quite right, but there was something horrific, like only 9% of the commercial offices in the UK are currently capable of achieving the standards that we need by 2030. Now, if you think about how long it takes to actually redevelop, to renovate, to refurbish existing buildings and build new buildings and new offices that can actually get to that level of environmental sustainability and performance, we've got a lot of work to do over the next few years, and that's one of the reasons why the forum is going to be ahead of the curve, because obviously its environmental credentials are as high as we've possibly been able to get them. So we're already experiencing strong interest from companies who are stating that is a very strong driver in terms of their business needs.
No, totally. It really resonated with me because I live in a house built in 1895.
Both.
and yeah, let's not even go there. No. My story this week has to be the very sad news of the death of Paul Soden, who was the owner of Cafe Rene. He's a friend of mine as well, a real true entrepreneur who loved Gloucester, loved his pubs, loved his staff, and he'll be greatly missed by everybody. So I just want to say a big cheers to everybody who loved Paul so much. He was a guy that before the pandemic had 50 staff and a turnover of £3 million, and he was really proud of what he achieved there. So big cheers to Paul. Sorry to leave on a sad note, but anyway, if you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again very soon. Thanks for joining us. Bye.